If your websites conduct transactions or collect sensitive data, you have a material risk on your hands that could cost millions. The client-side security gap is being exploited daily with attacks like digital skimming, credential harvesting, and form jacking. 98% of sites use first and third-party JavaScript to power and enhance the user experience, opening up the client side to the adversary. Unlike most things in security, there is an easy fix. Start by understanding your risk. Let Source Defense give you a site-wide risk report this week. Visit securityweekly.com/source defense.
Welcome back to Paul's Security Weekly without Paul. All new sans Paul night, or whatever you want to call it. I'm Doug White, and we've got some guests here, and we've got some hosts here, and this is going to be a segment of just panel talk about some different issues in cybersecurity. I have Major John Alfred, who's a retired state trooper in Rhode Island and was in charge of the computer crimes unit for many years, as well as being a founding member of the computers crime unit way back when. I've got Professor Tom Lonardo. Tom Lonardo is an associate professor at Roger Williams University in the School of Justice Studies and also the School of Business since 2008. As a member of the Rhode Island and Massachusetts Bar Association, been an attorney for 25 years, spent 21 years in commercial lending and leasing financial service industry as well as all that. Tom is very famous. He is. No, he's very famous for the dreaded Lonardo paper that bears his name in the forensics industry, which was a treatise on private investigation requirements in the 50 states that he put together. Has a lot of papers about Fourth Amendment privacy issues and revenge porn, which is always
very well downloaded.
I checked even, and because it's heavily downloaded. We also have on the line, we got Tyler Robinson. Hi, Tyler.
Doug, how are you doing?
I'm good. We got Josh Marpet up there in the corner.
Pleasure. What's going on, guys?
And in the center square, it's Lee Neely.
Hey, good to be here. I prepped for this segment by going to my Foreign Legion meeting last night. Does that sound great?
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, some of the stuff that I put in here was about privacy. I also, because of some of the stuff that's been going on, I had put in some stuff about the Foreign Legion, because there's sort of I think a current issue with people going off to Eastern Europe to fight for the Ukraine. There's probably some people going off to fight for the Russians. I don't know, but we have a friend who's off doing training in the Ukraine. And Aaron, good job, sir. You're always amazing. I won't say I'm envious, but I'm certainly in awe of what you're doing. And Aaron has released several videos of all the crazy training stuff he's doing, trying to help people in Ukraine learn how to fight, which is wow.
Yeah, he does have a GoFundMe page if anybody is looking for a good cause that we can 100% say we know the money is going towards something valid and worthwhile in Ukraine. So,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, 100%. He does have a GoFundMe. He's spending every penny of that money to help people in the Ukraine, including stray dogs, stray Ukrainian dogs. And I know he was helping them too, because somebody's got to. But yeah. So we had a whole bunch of different topics that I was putting together because I kind of wanted to do a panel with this, and I had some people here who have a lot of expertise on some of this stuff, and I always have lots of questions about this stuff as well. But like 1,000 years ago, I was logged into this system called Well of Chaos, and that was probably in the early to mid 90s. I don't remember the exact year. It was like a bulletin board system, and you could dial up there, and they had chats and such, and there was it was one of my first experiences with like a group environment made up of people, and so this one night, this main sysop type person who ran this thing, I have no idea who it was, probably somebody does, but I don't know, was live blogging the FBI coming to arrest them on this, and they kept saying, they kept posting, look, if you stay on, they're going to see who you are. They're going to get your number. They're going to get, and I was like, I didn't care because I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was just sitting there watching what was going on. But obviously people kept logging off. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be on here. But I literally stayed on there to the point where he was like, they're breaking down the door. They're coming in the room. They're gonna, and then it went off, and it was like, and I don't really know what happened with that, but it was really weird, kind of thing. That was the first sort of experience I had with that sort of thing, with like the police getting involved in this stuff. Because before that, it was very self-policing. You know, back in the 80s when I was a sysop and so forth at the university, you didn't call the police. You didn't call campus security. You just fought back. If people started messing with the system, I had all kinds of scripts that I wrote that were just attack scripts. It was like, mess with me, I'm coming for you. I'm going to eat you alive. I'm gonna hurt you real bad, and you'll not do this again. Kevin Mitnick, very well-known name in this industry, was arrested in 1995 and was charged with wire fraud. And Robert Morris was arrested in 1988 for the Morris worm and was charged under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. So 86 was when they put this in. I mean, obviously there were computers before that. The film Hackers took place in 1988 in the movie, but it was actually released in 1995. And the original movie that started all this was War Games, because this was War Games came out in 1983. And I think it was the first time a lot of people in the public sector, not tech people, not IT people, but public people, started thinking about hacking, and that hacking might actually be a problem or a thing. And so one of the things I wanted us to talk about was to talk about laws that are used to prosecute people for, computer fraud and abuse. And so I thought Tom would be a great choice to maybe brief us a little bit about Title IX CFAA. I know all of us know what this is. None of us are attorneys except Tom, as far as I know. But I thought Tom could give us a little guidance on this law that's been around since 1986.
Right. It's been around since 1986 with amendments covering various scenarios. There are 7 major sections to the law dealing with hacking into national security records, trespass on computers, and a lot of the terminology that sets the table, and we just had the case, the Van Buren case, talks about prohibiting or trying to prohibit people from going into protected computers, government computers, and banks and credit reporting agencies. And there's been quite a few, actually a lot more activity, it seems as of late, dealing with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, dealing with trespass and gaining information. And now we have the basically threatening to damage computers. The ransomware is becoming very big now, very profitable. In fact, I think the RIPTA just paid $170,000 to ransomware to release those records. So there's a lot of going on relative to hacking internally and externally relative to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Is it the perfect scheme to prevent computer fraud? Probably not. There's a lot of holes in it. But it's the best that we have right now, because the technology really doesn't catch up to the law for years and years and years. In fact, a lot of the cases coming through as of the last 5 years have been in the system for a long, long time through appeals and remanding back to the lower courts. We talked about the HiQ case. So the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act does have limitations, but like I said, it's probably the best tool we have right now to prosecute domestic, because I laugh when I hear that the government has indicted 6 Russians in Russia for hacking. I laugh, because what is the point besides making headlines?
Well, till they show up at DEF CON.
Right, exactly.
Because that's happened, right? I mean, people under indictment have shown up at DEF CON.
Yeah,
hey, I'm here.
Yeah, it's so.
Well, let me ask John. I want to ask John a question too. Then we can talk. But so, I don't think we need to talk about child pornography, because I think we all know, and that's long established, that's a bad thing, it's illegal, and so on. But what do you use to prosecute somebody in Rhode Island or the United States in general for computer crimes, besides the child porn stuff? I mean, so some other kind of crime.
So like Tom was saying, that was what, 1986?
86 was when that law was passed.
So 1989, Rhode Island pretty much mirrored the law. And they created the law, and so we got 1152, which is the state law. So 11 being criminal, 52 being the computer crimes statutes. It pretty much almost exactly mirrors the CFA.
That's pretty common in statutes, though, because I know I worked on the infamous Lonardo paper too. I didn't work much, but Tom did all the work, but I just took the credit. But
Not true.
At least you're honest.
It's not true.
well, that's what senior faculty does.
Yeah.
But I know we looked at all the 50 states. We saw that over and over again. It was like, so this state copied that state, copied this state,
there's
copied
no
that state.
originality in a lot of these statutory
Well, if you got something on the
schemes.
books and it works, why bother? I mean, if Missouri passed a law and it's the same law you want to have, why go through the whole gyration of? I mean, you see these weird ones that somebody did their own thing completely, but it's kind of complicated. So Rhode Island has something very similar, so they could prosecute people in the state. And then obviously that could go up to FBI and they get prosecuted federally if they were doing that same kind of thing. So I think the first question I was going to ask everybody was, what do you think that, because one of the big tenets of this is authorized use. I mean, this is sort of
without authorization and excessive authorization.
And so this is a big deal. So I was going to ask everybody what they think authorization actually is. And so anybody go.
You want the
Tyler's
definition of
smiling. I think he has an idea.
Seriously?
What if the court said that it is? Or what do you think it is?
Okay, are you talking about authorization in terms of authorization to information? It is anything that does not have a gate in front of it.
A physical gate?
The equivalent of a physical gate.
Can you further expound on that, please?
Somebody's on the stand.
According to the HiQ case, is it HiQ? I can never remember the name.
It's either Hick or HiQ. I think HiQ sounded better.
They used the Van Buren case to support the HiQ case.
Yeah, but I mean, basically what you're talking about is the equivalent is, because let's talk about before that case.
Mm-hmm.
Before that case, it doesn't matter if they say you weren't authorized, you weren't authorized. And it's like, well, bullshit. Try again. Because I'm able to access it without any request for authorization in the sense of authentication authorization. I'm able to access it from a publicly available website. I'm able to access it without anybody saying boo or stopping me or asking for anything. Come on. And they said, okay. So then the LinkedIn case came around, and the idea was you have to have some way of showing that you have bypassed or gone over or around or through or whatever, a barrier of some sort. So a gate. And in this case, what they've said was, if you don't have a gate, and it can be as simple as that motto of the day thing that we've been doing for how many years? Usage of this system is not authorized unless you're a duly authorized user. If you're not sure that you're authorized, please go here, blah, blah. You know the routine. But the idea is that there has to be a gate of some sort.
How does an insider threat?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Tyler.
how does that play out for things like international data that is open on them, or breach data that is, it is breach data. Someone illegally obtained it, but now it is public and it is on a public site that doesn't require a gate. I am curious.
Well, yeah, I think that was one of my questions was, what if somebody takes something illegally and they put it up in public, and I look at it? Am I committing a crime? I mean.
No, it's the actor. No. It's the person who actually got the information for the most part. But if you had knowledge that it was illegally obtained, that could be a different situation. If you had knowledge, because open source information on the web, anybody can look at it and it doesn't violate. And it was the HiQ case. They said there was no barriers and there was no gate. So what's the issue here relative to the CFAA? Because without authorization envisions an outside hacker, an excessive authorization means an inside person who doesn't have the authority. And at one time it was you didn't have authority because of a policy issue, possibly. But the Van Buren case did away with that and they used the gate analogy, password protection, but they weren't really explicit in Van Buren what that gate would be. That's the problem.
I'm kind of with, I know John said something a minute ago. I'm kind of with on that. Like, when is a gate a gate? I mean, digitally. I mean, obviously, if I show up at your house and you've got a gate, does that gate have to have a padlock on it, or if it's just like a swinging gate, can I walk through it?
When it envisions, when I envision or I demonstrate that you are not allowed in this particular area. If I have a gate that's open in my front yard and you walk in, but I have a lock on that gate, I'm telling you, you're not allowed in that yard. That's the physical analogy.
Okay, so what if I piped a file? Like, they don't have the permissions in place, and I just literally pipe a file out of another directory.
Did you have the authority to be in that directory?
I don't know.
Did you have to use a pass? Were you an outsider?
No, I logged in with my account, but then I piped a file out of another directory.
Was the password protected?
No.
Then if you, did you?
No gate.
Go ahead.
Wait.
No, so then there's no gate. Again,
There's
this
no
is-
gate.
Well, I know that's what I'm saying. So it's like, so if you set chmod 777 and I pipe a file, the password shadow file out of another directory, I mean that's not a gate, right?
Wait.
Well-
Actually, there is, because you said that you changed the mode of the file to 777.
No, I didn't. They had it. No, I didn't change it.
Somebody else did?
I
Okay,
just
my bad,
logged into
never
my
mind.
little
So-
dinky user account on a bulletin board system, and I'm sitting there and I go, I'm just going to see if I could pipe this file over, and I pipe it over.
What did your EULA say? What did your end user license agreement say?
I didn't read it, Your Honor. I'm illiterate.
Did you click to agree to it?
I mean,
No, not on the bulletin board system. No way.
I think
No.
think
I'm
some
just
of the
saying.
bigger-
There's a lot of systems now you have to agree to the EULA,
Well, yeah.
and if it's an employer system or otherwise, you've also got EULAs that might be in your employment contract or other places that limit your activity.
All I
They're
saw was
binding.
when I signed in, I saw that message of the day banner that says unauthorized use prohibited.
Right. Well, that's
I
too
think this
damn
is-
vague.
Yeah, it is.
But that's what a lot of the stuff has.
Well, since the Van Buren case, everyone's looking at, if you don't have to go through any barriers, for example, in that case, the police officer was allowed to go into, it's like an IRS agent going in and looking at other people's files. They're not allowed to look at it by policy of the IRS, but if they have access to it, they're doing it legitimately. There's no violation of the CFAA.
that's where scraping kind of came in. Right? Like
Exactly.
there's a ton of cases right now around scraping and the scraping of data, and I think that even plays into the breach data. And if scraping data and or breach data, once it's been publicized, it becomes illegal and someone sets precedence to that, I'm going to tell you there's a half a dozen, maybe even 50 companies that are worth billions of dollars that are doing this day to day as part of their threat intelligence CTI pipeline. Or so like this brings about a lot of questions that need to be answered, but also without setting precedents, there needs to be some guidance around it.
There needs to be a more bright line rule, ultimately.
Well, yeah, I think that was my point, because I know John. If I call John and I say, like, I actually did this case, it was another state, it wasn't here, it was a long time ago. But if I had some kids in a school and they took the whole grade database, they dumped it and printed it out and put it out because it was wide open. I mean, it was not protected. The system didn't even have a password on it when we went and looked at it. It was just like the password was blank. You just hit the enter key and you're in the system.
There's no gate.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the principal of the school asked me. He was like, "Do you think we can get the police up here to prosecute?" He was really upset about this because the kid put all the grades up. They put and they knew who did it. And the kid basically said, "Go ahead, put me in jail. I'll try it." And his father was an attorney, and they were saying, that it's just youthful hijinks. And my opinion was they didn't break the law. I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an attorney and I wasn't practicing law, but I was like, you can try, but I don't think the police are going to come do anything about that.
We had a very similar case to that around exam time, because a lot of the kids take exams online now.
Right.
And that's what the kid did. He went up and it was wide open, and he took it down, and he took the answers before the exam was taken, and it caused a problem, a real problem.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. I'm going to ask everybody this one. If you have a bicycle and it's up on your front porch, can I go up and take that from the front porch because there's nothing locked?
Nice.
What do you think?
Oh, you're bad, John. You're bad.
So the answer is what? Let me make it a little harder. Put that bicycle at the edge of your yard, right next to the street, leaning up against a lamp pole.
No
What's it
longer
look
within
like?
the curtilage of the
Yeah,
yard.
it's outside the curtilage.
Are we in Amsterdam or not? I mean, that doesn't
Okay,
matter.
I think his example's getting really specific now. Is it morning or evening?
Well,
Is it the red light
does the
district
keeper
where
of the
Tyler
data,
can get
The
found?
bike red or
keeper-
blue?
Hang on. Tom and then Josh.
so if the keeper of the data envisions that you do not have access to certain information, it's incumbent upon the keeper of that data to make sure that it is not allowed to be accessed. And that's what Van Buren says. I mean, if you're keeping something that's open and pretty much anyone with a reasonable degree of skill can get into that system, then you really haven't violated the without authorization.
So can I take the bicycle or not?
Take the bike. It depends on the bike. If it's a good bike.
If it's a good bike.
Yeah, otherwise I just leave it on the side of the road.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
So the thing is that, you've asked a really good question. Is that bike free? And I mean, if somebody sticks up a note on it that says free, and it's not the owner of the bike that sticks the note on it, but somebody walks by and in full honest, oh, it's a free bike, great, goes and grabs it and takes it with them. Are they a thief? You've got a lot of, which goes back to Tyler's question about if somebody takes breach data that was released and then makes it available on a website, are they doing something illegal?
I'll give you one more, Josh.
Okay, he's got
How
another one.
about if you go up to an ATM and the person before you left their ATM card there and their bank is still open? Is it okay to put that in there and take $10 million out of that account?
That's why there's a PIN code.
No, it's logged in.
It's logged in because he left it there, he forgot his card, and he drove away.
Once they complete their transaction, you have to put the PIN code in to do another transaction.
No, not always.
They don't.
Yes, you do.
It depends on
I
the
know.
ATM's
I know when they don't have to do that.
I couldn't tell you because my wife won't let me have a debit card.
It depends on
It's
your
not
risk
meeting
profile,
the NCUA or FFIEC rules. Just FYI.
Yeah, some ATMs are implemented. You can only do one transaction per PIN entry. Others you can continue until you elect to end the session.
Correct.
And then I think it's the latter case we're talking about. And I think
well, that would be basically stealing somebody's PIN, and that's covered under the CFAA. Using a
No, I'm talking about the use case where you've entered the PIN once, the transaction the session is still good, and you're just walking on the session.
Yeah, you didn't take the PIN. You don't know the PIN. They just left it logged in, drove off.
These are real cases, by the way.
No, I actually saw that once. I actually pulled up to an ATM and the thing was still logged in and the person's card was still in the machine. And I guess they just took off and I just pulled their card out and it terminated the session. But right. I mean, and I actually took the card and mailed it to the bank because I didn't know what to do with it, but their name was on it and I didn't know how to reach out to them. But yeah, they left it. I could have extracted money from their account.
So now you're a bug bounty hunter and you're a security researcher and you've turned that in and you should be rewarded. So it depends on your moral grounds and the ramifications and risk appetite.
It really is theft.
They're liable.
It's theft. It's just plain theft. Forget the CFAA, forget all the laws. It's just plain theft.
Well, I guess ultimately what my question then is can you prosecute somebody for what a reasonable person should assume to be theft? This is back to the bicycle problem.
If they knew it wasn't their card and they intended to do that, the intent is the theft. The intent to appropriate other people's money that they know it's not theirs is theft.
The classic example of this is an apple tree. Okay, and I'm not joking. Actually, this is a classic example. If there's an apple tree in your neighbor's yard and some of the branches overhanging your yard, the apples that fall off those branches and fall in your yard are yours. Mm-hmm. No problem. Nobody disputes this. And you're like, all right, so apples that fall off the tree and land in my yard are mine. I'm just going to put a slanty board on the top of the fence, and the apples will hit the board on the other side of the fence, but they'll hit the ground on my side. Is that theft?
Yes. Because you put that board inside the other person's property with the intent to steal their apples.
You've gone over a gate.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like let's take this like to the next level. Like breach data.
Any law you make. Give me 1 second, Tyler, I apologize. Any law you make, somebody will try to game. It's just that simple.
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead, Tyler. I'm sorry.
Okay, Tyler.
Is there precedence around this? Like for something like breach data, that data was obtained illegally. It has PII, PHI, it's got credit card numbers in it, you've got PCI violations. Like this data is dirty, let's be real. What is the law about having that data? Like, if my house was raided, they're going to have a really, really, really bad time with that 50 terabytes of data that has breach stuff on it. Like those records, like would I be prosecuted because I've got PII, PCI, intellectual property, government, classified documents? all of those things that are now public but are part of breach data, like where does that fall with inside the law and what's going to get prosecuted now?
Well, remember WikiLeaks? I'm going to throw something out there.
Yes.
Remember WikiLeaks? When WikiLeaks was actively being disseminated, everybody was like, "Oh my God, did you see the cables from last night or whatever?" If you had a clearance and you actually looked at that by accident because it came across, the news or whatever, you had to report that to your FSO, your facility security officer, and you could potentially lose your clearance for accidentally seeing classified data, even though you had nothing to do with it. So there is precedent of sorts for, even though you had nothing to do with it, there's ramifications or consequences.
That's not a good thing, though. Like, let's be real from a government standpoint, and what intel's being out there, and what you're worried about looking at or not looking at because you don't want to have to, go do a form. Like, that seems like a pretty bad thing because that's where we're getting intel, that's where we're getting data, that's things that should be reported in a chain without the fear of having to lose a clearance over some of that stuff. So
if you just look at data and you go in and you just look at data, that's a misdemeanor. If you go into a system without authorization or an excessive authorization and just look at data, just the view, you're a busybody. That's not a felony. That falls under.
But it is back to that word authorization again.
Oh, of course.
Which is an awfully snaky
Oh,
word.
it is.
I mean,
It
that's
is.
already the Supreme Court, right? I mean,
Right.
that they're trying to decide what that word means. Because it's not as simple as I got a lock on my bicycle. It's a much
That's
more.
pretty obvious, right? We do a
It's
lot.
a much more esoteric kind of problem.
It is, and the courts haven't really resolved it to any great degree.
Well, I mean, that leads back to this LinkedIn and HiQ case about scraping. So when they were doing scraping, the data they were scraping off LinkedIn was public.
It was public.
And LinkedIn didn't like it.
Possibly.
And my cynical self says LinkedIn didn't like it because they weren't making any money off of it.
Well, because they developed their own software program,
Well,
and the day after, pretty much after they announced they had their
But that
own.
HiQ company sued them and said they're trying to prevent us. They sent us a cease and desist letter, and now they're putting technological blocks in to keep us. Now, and this is the thing I really wanted to ask. They put technological blocks in. It didn't say what those were, but the court still said they couldn't do it. And I'm like, wait a minute. They put a technological block in. Isn't that some kind of authorization?
They don't own the data, and here's the thing: you can't have it. You can't have it both ways.
So it's your bicycle on the porch.
Yeah, so you can't have it both ways. You can't say that people who post on my site, it's their information, it's their data. We're just a platform. Therefore, you can't sue us for whatever's posted on our site. We don't own that. Now, LinkedIn's saying, well, even though you own the data, you own the LinkedIn posting, we have some kind of property right for that. And they don't. They don't have a property right.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right.
You can't have your bicycle and eat it.
If you want to be classified as a utility or a common carrier, you cannot also be classified as a copyright owner.
Exactly.
Okay, well that actually really helps because I was reading that and I kind of did get lost in it, and I was like, it seems like that there's an authorization here, but then there's not an authorization. But yeah, actually, when you said it was my data that they were hosting,
right?
So how does
Because remember, if it's their data, they're responsible for the content of the data. If if CSAM, child pornography material shows up in that data, you're, as the owner of LinkedIn or whatever, responsible for it. So, which means you have to go through every single posting and moderate everything, and that's going to slow it down. And that's like,
so let me ask another weird question then. So, wouldn't it behoove companies that collect data? And I don't mean like LinkedIn, but I mean like, say, a public utility that collects all my information to just not have any security at all and say it's all on you. You shouldn't have put it in there if you didn't want people to see it.
If only we knew somebody from one of the national labs and how they handle data and information there.
Lee? Well, while Lee's thinking about his answer, I worked at a national lab as well. I worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratories, and the way we handled data was classified data by the federal government, and so it was the property of the federal government, and it was considered secret and of interest to the national security. So if you want to mess with it, somebody's going to come pay you a visit.
So
but
let
most
me jump
data
on
in a
from
national
there.
lab. Go ahead, Lee. I'm sorry.
So we have multiple forms of unclassified data. Now with the CUI rules, we have 28 categories of sensitive unclassified data, plus our normal categories of, confidential, secret, and top secret, all of which are forms of classified data, with riders on top of that. But all the government systems are supposed to have a banner that basically says everything on here belongs to the federal government. There is no expectation of privacy. We see anything, we're going to report it to law enforcement, and you have to accept that when you're using their systems, called a login ban or whatever. And I actually posted it over in Discord a little bit ago, one the DOE likes, and also covers the right to privacy. Basically, doing anything on the system, authenticated or not, you're expected to accept that agreement, and it's supposed to be at the first level when you access it. But but beyond that, you also have you're supposed to have controls on access to data. Public data, you're not have any controls, but anything that's got sensitivity to it is that you're supposed to be limiting it to by need to know, as well as protecting it commensurate with its sensitivity. So once you get into sensitive data, let alone classified, it is it shouldn't be just readily available. And they often argue that just users on a system may have the same need to know. Well, that's fine, and the users need to know that. So. But that doesn't give you the right to exfiltrate the data. It means you can access the data and use it depending on the EULA for that type of data. Long answers, Doug. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, that's the answers I wanted to hear. I mean, I don't think short answers are going to work here. I mean, it's a very complex issue, and in my opinion, I've read this stuff. I mean, one of the things I get really frustrated with is my data keeps getting lost. For instance, my classified top secret data was stolen, and they said it was stolen, so it wasn't a question of should they have been allowed to steal it or anything like that. But I got told that the top secret clearance file data that I filled out back when I worked for Oak Ridge National Laboratory was stolen by, and then the letter said an unknown third party, and
China.
China.
We'll indict them.
No, I would.
But they took it. And so we have all these laws. Shouldn't we have some kind of law that says that something gets done about this? Because I get really tired of getting these. I get these notifications about once a year saying they've signed me up for some kind of identity theft program because all my data was stolen yet again, and they don't seem to have a lot of incentive to stop that. So it's just like my data's all out there.
Well, if you in the EU, you'd have recourse.
I would.
Oh, yeah.
They have some good laws there.
Oh, very, very restrictive laws.
I got reimbursed in fact, I got reimbursed so much money for my flight that I was able to pay for my whole trip out of the reimbursement I got for my flight because my flight was canceled without prior notice with no good reason.
Wow.
Literally, because that's an EU law. They actually are required by law. I had that happen 3 times. My flight was canceled or delayed, and they have to give you money.
I think this country has to really get in line with the EU General Data Protection Regulation as far as how they clamp down on how users and controllers make certain information available, and basically the consent issues and all those things that go along with that regulation. We're far from that in this country, far from it.
Well, I don't think companies want it because it creates an immediate liability issue, right, for a company. Because if you say it's a problem and they have to do something, even if they just have to give you the price of a postage stamp, California has something, right, where they have to pay something. It's like nothing. It's trivial, but it does sort of say the company did something wrong.
But you're going to prove damages. That's the other.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, if it's a private action, you're going to prove that you were somehow damaged by it, and that's.
Well, the first time that ever happened to me in Colorado, the university said a hard drive that contained all financial employee history information, which included your social security number, your bank account numbers, your credit card, or anything the university had of yours, was left laying on a loading dock, and someone took it. And they sent a letter, and it said, "We advise you strongly to change your social security number, all passwords, all bank accounts should be reissued as new numbers, and you should cancel all credit cards and have them reissued with new numbers." And they said hourly employees will be given a 30-minute leeway to do this. Of course, I was a faculty member, so I was just told tough. And, I was like, if I tried to do all this, it would take me days to do this. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a substantial enough penalty for companies not to secure that information. And, the EU has, the greater of 4% of your gross revenues, or the greater of $24 million or 4% of your gross revenues. Amazon was whacked for $877 million in 21 because of that. So we don't have the teeth in these cases.
I don't think it's necessarily an issue, though, of companies not wanting to do it. I think there are companies that don't do a great job. I think there's not like budget applied to some of those companies. However, I will say that we have a huge shortage of people that know how to do that well and do it right. Like, we see all these companies investing billions. We've got all these blinky boxes. We've got appliances. We've got all the technology to do this, and we still have more breaches day to day than, call it 5-10 years ago. So again, we're not solving this with technology. We're not solving this strictly with people, and we're not solving this with more money. So I don't think regulation is even going to fix that particular problem, right? We're still going to run into some of this.
Well, that's the frustrating part. I mean, you're exactly right. Every day you're hearing about some kind of data breach, and it just keeps happening. And the public is saying, wait a minute, we have this technology. Why can't we prevent this? We have all. We're the United States, for God's sakes. Why can't we stop this?
Oh,
we should be able to stop this. So we take monetary value away from identities, make identities public, put some crypto behind this, and I mean cryptography, and remove all of the things that people are selling. Now we've got the ability to limit that marketplace and the data that is getting. Intellectual property will always be a thing. Insider trading is always going to be a thing, but digital identities and what we use for passwords, for voting, for taxes, Social Security, for credit cards, all those things, make those public and put some crypto behind it.
I mean, that's the no privacy is all privacy, right? I mean, that's sort of that kind of philosophy.
That Estonia approach that they've kind of moved to, which seems to make sense. But again, there's holes in it, obviously.
I mean, I thought that the European laws were going to basically. I was wrong, but I thought when they passed those laws, what everybody would do is just move all their operations away from there.
They didn't.
No. Yeah. No, they didn't. I mean, I was like, okay, everybody's going to quit operating there and say, forget it. We're not fooling with this.
Ireland has one of the best corporate tax rates in the world. So you're going to have a headquarters in Ireland. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that these companies do. So $877 million to Amazon is probably...
Well, so do you think that if there are influences from the law in the EU because companies do business there and they do comply, so you saw that
there's a lot of red tape too that you have to, and there's a lot of money that has to be invested to comply with that too as well. And I'm not sure the companies in the United States want to go through that rigorous process.
What does law enforcement tell people, John? I'm sure you guys get calls about this all the time. Because I mean, we're all tech people, and so I think when we get these things, we kind of have an understanding of it. But like, if my dad didn't have me to call, if he'd gotten one of those letters, he would have been kind of freaked out, and he probably would have called like local law enforcement and said, "What do I do here?"
So we in Rhode Island changed the law in 2018, I guess it was, kind of based on what California had so that if a company is hacked, they have to notify the individual. So there's no regulation that says you have to pay, the 40% or whatever it was, the 4%
of their gross
which
revenues.
Was like the EU, but it says you have to notify the person. And if there's over 500 people Rhode Islanders that have been involved with the breach, you have to also notify the AG's office. And if you don't do that, and then there are regulations that's going to they're going to charge you with some type of penalty.
If they're in Rhode Island.
If they're in Rhode Island, right? Yeah.
But that's not really a preventative measure. That's an after-the-fact measure.
Because
it's like driving. It's like driving while talking on the phone. If you're not going to enforce it and you have those laws on the books, really doesn't do much. The
reason that we did it, and I was part of the writing of it, was that many companies were getting hit and they weren't notifying. Mm-hmm. So John Alfred gets hit with they steal my Social Security number, my date of birth, and I don't even know what happened. Well, now there's a little bit of teeth, but not big teeth, right? That says, hey, you have to notify that guy so that he can get some protection, and you have to provide them with some protection as well.
RIPTA didn't notify the people until, what, 4 or 5 months later.
I was one of those people.
And in the EU, you have 72 hours.
Yeah, that was wrong. They should have notified within.
As soon as they knew about it, they should have notified.
Well, the law reads as long as it's not going to interfere with law
laws.
enforcement, but there was no interference with law enforcement. They just didn't know They didn't know the brevity. They had no idea how much they lost.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and they can always claim ignorance too. I mean, you know, the company go, we didn't know we lost the data for weeks and weeks. I mean, I'm sure they do that in the EU too, where they're just like, oh, we did. Really? You know?
Well, once it's reported, they have to act on it in the EU. Once it's reported by someone.
Well, Tom, in 2018, I remember that everybody thought it was like Chicken Little. They thought the world was going to fall down, right?
Right.
But I haven't seen, and maybe you can tell me, or maybe some of the panel can tell me what has happened in the EU since that law's gone into effect, besides the Amazon.
Oh, there were
since GDPR?
Google?
Yes,
Google
GDPR.
had been hit.
Oh, okay.
A lot of companies have been hit.
Since GDPR went into effect, the companies in the EU have gotten very serious about ISO 27001 and ISO 27018 because that gets you more closely to GDPR. There's a new ISO standard 27556 that was rewritten for personal customer information, and I don't like it. It's not very well written. I think they've redone it. I haven't gotten the redone yet. But companies in general, you got to understand that the attitude is very different. In Europe, a company traditionally will be ISO certified before anybody even asks. Okay? They have a very different attitude about doing business than we do, which is one of the reasons that a lot of them come over here. They can get a startup started without having to spend $500,000 on an ISO audit.
So it's a culture issue.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is.
What's that?
It's a culture issue.
Oh, it's a major culture issue. Plus, as well, they've revamped. I've worked with some companies over in Europe, and what they've done is they've revamped how they handle data. They've revamped their EULA, which Lee mentioned earlier. They've revamped all of their how they handle data. You got to remember that they also have. Are you familiar with PSD2?
No.
So this is an interesting one, and it shows the difference in cultures. PSD2 was PSD2, I forget, is another one. Every bank is required to let anybody access any account. Not as bad as you think. Anybody can be the front end for the bank. So if Facebook, for example, says, hey, you have an account at Royal Bank of Scotland. Would you like us to be the way you access that account? And you go, yeah, I'd really like that. Royal Bank of Scotland must, by law, allow Facebook to have an API access to your accounting information. So in other words, I'll never go to the bank website again. I would just access my bank through Facebook. That screws a lot of banks and adds them, adds a lot of cost for the bank because they have to now build this API access.
Wow.
So culturally, it's hugely, hugely different. Does that make sense as to what some of the pieces of this cultural differences?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that too. Although, I will say, I used to work with some companies in Europe, and that idea drops out pretty much as you go down to the lower levels.
Well, when you look at the actual fines, there are not really a lot of European countries that are being assessed these fines. Most of them, these are American companies, American-originated companies that do business in the EU.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah. A lot of these fines, except for H&M, which is a clothier, and that includes like videotaping in Europe. I mean, you just can't just videotape people without their permission and use that information for any purposes without their consent.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I was going to ask about, and I was going to ask John his opinion about this too. But something we've seen a lot of news stories about is facial recognition. And the idea that you know, I mean, and the sort of my law enforcement hat, which is, I mean, I'm not law enforcement, but I've worked with a lot. My law enforcement hat is like, well, that's a pretty good idea, because if people are down at the ATM machine stealing purses and running away, it's pretty handy to be able to figure out who they are and say, oh, it was Doug, he did it, let's go get him, because here's the picture and we've got him. And I see these things all the time on Facebook and Ring and all these other places going, does anybody know this guy? Right. You know, there was that naked guy that was like going crazy at gas stations recently in Rhode Island, and they had it was in Mass, I think, but they had all these, you know, video of him, and you know, he's got all these tattoos, and he's like jumping out of his car, and everybody's like, can anybody know who this is?
And you knew him.
It was done.
Yeah, I was like, I guess you could say I knew him. But I mean, so the part of me is like, that's a great idea, but I did want to see, what do you think about that?
So, Rhode Island's a very liberal state to begin with.
Yeah.
As you may know. I don't know if you do or don't know, but the panel as well.
Much got the idea, yeah.
So, I used to oversee the Fusion Center at some point, and a lot of times we were trying to get plate readers, license plate readers, and we get a lot of pushback just for that, much less facial recognition. Because people didn't want us looking at, where people were with their plates and whatnot. So we've gone beyond that. Cranston, for example, just installed, I think, 5 or 6 different LPR license plate readers.
And cameras.
And cameras. And as a result of that, they've solved quite a few crimes.
They did.
For that,
Well,
And
I want to point out that your point about ALPR, automatic license plate readers, is moot. Let me explain. There's a company called Vigilant that buys the databases of private individuals and private companies that have installed ALPR cameras, license plate reader cameras on their cars, and just drive around. There's people that make livings out of just driving around mall parking lots and driving around streets and residential neighborhoods and such. At the end of the day, they upload their data to Vigilant, get paid for it, and go on their way. I'm not saying it's a great living. I don't know how it is. I don't know the details. But the point is there's a private company that has law enforcement you can go to and go, hey, I've got a license plate. Tell me where it was. And they'll tell you where that license plate was at least 3 or 4 times that day, almost invariably.
Right.
So when the municipalities put up the ALPR cameras, they were going to solve things that are relevant to them without having to go through Vigilant. But the privatization of some of these things, such as ALPR, has solved some crimes. Absolutely not even questioning that. It's also caused a lot of issues and is a huge privacy issue, problem, kind of weirding me out.
But that is the other caveat to some of this that I find comical when you start to realize what kind of databases and tracking that everyone is signing up for. Like you read any of your ULA on any of the apps, any of your mobile providers, all of your data is almost all tracked. It's all being sold. It's all in databases that are searchable, correlatable. I can figure out exactly where you are based on the hotspots that you pass because that data gets uploaded to mobile carriers and back-end data that gets sold off. Like we can track all of that. So as long as the general public doesn't blatantly see what is tracking them, they will agree to anything, and it is already tracking them. So should it be a barrier of entry for things like law enforcement to put up some dumb cameras that are going to solve some stuff in which if they had the money and resources, they could actually go get that exact same data in a lot more harvestable fashion and get the exact same information?
Well,
There's
so
a
my question,
cryptocurrency piece right now called Helium, which actually has helium miners scattered around the country, and they're tracking the people that attach to them, and Xfinity, and you name it. And the amount of data. Vizio, Vizio TVs, they actually make more money on tracking your viewership habits than they do on selling the TV. That's why they're all smart TVs. There's no such thing as a dumb TV in the Vizio line.
John?
All cell phones report that back. All the hotspots that you pass, that cell phone data and the hotspots that you pass and the geolocation can all be correlated to layer 3 data that has like 98% of the internet. Like if you're on a VPN, I can still see which hotspots you were when you hit a particular Tor node and exit node and coming through a VPN. Like all that data is there, it's available, and it's all being tracked. Like I don't know why this is a surprise to anybody now.
John.
So let me ask you. So if I stood on the side of the highway with my camera on my phone and let the cars drive by, and I picked up all the plates, why is that so weird? Why is that
That's what I don't get by the general public. Like, why is that weird to the general public? They're already opting in and doing this tracking day to day with their social media. Like
it's all perception though. It's always one of these things where everybody's against it until it happens to them. If they get robbed, they'll be more than happy that they had all kinds of surveillance, that because they're going to get really angry if they call the state police and they say, I got robbed. I mean, just physical stuff. I got robbed down by the gas station. I want you to do something about it. And if you go in and go pull the camera footage and you show them exactly who it is and go, it was this guy named Ted. He's right here. We know where he lives. We're going to go arrest him. They're going to be really happy with you, even if they really hated the idea of this stuff all along. And yeah, like Tyler says, everybody's being tracked all the time anyway. I mean, your phone's being tracked. My car is sitting out there right now talking to somebody. Mm-hmm. I know it is because it does it all the time, and my phone buzzes and says your car is sitting at this location. So I know it's communicating, right. And I willingly let that happen. Right. So I think we're moving in that direction. I think there's just still this sort of old idea that this privacy shield kind of exists and it somehow protects you from something, even though a lot of it's gone out the window.
Well, look how much information is shared on social media, and everyone's giving up all their privacy rights, and they don't think twice about it. They go to the bathroom and they got to put it on Facebook. I mean, it's not.
You don't
something,
put that on the Facebook?
No, I don't.
I do.
When else do you have time to go on Facebook?
Oh man,
I'm not on Facebook.
I go while I'm going to the bathroom.
There's two things. Like there used to be the pleaserobme.com, if you remember that from the old days, where it would correlate your Foursquare check-ins with your home address that you give out freely in social media and be like, hey, go rob, Doug White's house. He's just checked into his favorite whiskey bar 30 miles from his house, and here's his home address because he gave it up. Right. And people freaked out and they shut it down and they shut it down deliberately. They're like, we did what we wanted to do. And then there's the always fascinating piece of what's the difference between a technology enthusiast and a technologist? And I think I've told this joke before, but a technology enthusiast has voice activated everything. There's screens in every wall. There's all kinds of neat gadgets and lovely, wonderful widgets everywhere. A technologist has a printer and a shotgun in case the printer starts talking.
I feel that. But I do think privacy is a very squishy issue at this point. I mean, 50 years ago, you could actually talk about privacy to some degree, but I don't think I felt my privacy was being invaded when I first had to fill out all these top secret paperwork things.
So to answer your original question, talk about facial recognition when we went on the tangent about the LPRs. Mm-hmm. Go to Facebook and go over on a person's face, they know who it is.
Yeah.
Right? What's the difference?
No, I'm completely there. I know what's going on, and I know there's not very much I can do about it, and there's cameras all over the place. And honestly, I kind of like the idea most of the time because I saw a traffic accident the other day, and they were asking, did anybody see what happened? And it's like there's 15 cameras around that, not to mention all the dashboard cams and people with their phone. I'm like, I'd say you got it covered. Yeah.
I think we need to really distinguish and start articulating our words and our vocabulary better, like the difference between privacy, surveillance, and observation. Like all of those are very, very different words, and they all have different meanings and different use cases. I think where we really need to start investing our time, because we're well past the surveillance state, we're well past the observation state. When we're talking about privacy, I think some of the things that I really get concerned about, because you can't hide your identity, you have a really hard time, even if you know what you're doing, erasing those records and hiding from some of this stuff that even if you're good at this, the nefarious stuff you're doing. The things I worry about are my kids and my grandkids, the data that's being kept for genetics, for CRISPR data, for their ability to obtain life insurance because they can have a genetic marker that puts them in a higher risk category for things later. Or someday maybe we get taken over. We're not a democracy. Maybe we're not a country that has good moral upbringings, and all of the data that is used on U.S. citizens and the biometrics, all the things that make you an individual and unique. Those are the things I really think we need to get ahead of. And it's already like the CRISPR data and a lot of the databases that are being built with 23andMe and Ancestry, like all of those, I think we're maybe past that point of no return. But I think we need to be concerned about those particular privacy things that have bigger ramifications much further in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's an old sci-fi story about the whole thing that you're talking about insurance. That like there I don't remember the name of the story or who wrote it, but I remember reading it, and it was about exactly that. It was about these people who are being denied all kinds of medical care because of decisions and lifestyle choices that their great grandparents made, and they had this database of DNA, and they're going, "You're just not a good risk. I'm sorry. Your great grandfather was smoking weed. Things have gone south. Too bad."
I can see
that.
Yeah,
they're genetic markers. That is already data being sold to brokerage companies that sell this back to insurance companies for, highly addictive behavior, for personality disorders, for, your markers of schizophrenia, all of these things that play into maybe a security clearance role, or things again that your family line may end up having to deal with later on. Like, we've got to at least put some say and some forethought around this. But again, no one's talking about it, no one's thinking about it, and they're giving this data up willingly as part of a monetary value to go find your long lost second cousin or the lady your dad slept with on a one night stand in Florida. Like, all of these things are willingly given up for convenience.
So yeah, I guess in the end, I think we've all kind of agreed that privacy is a fleeting thing at this point. That most of us have willingly. I saw Josh put up a cartoon that we're all carrying cameras around with us willingly. I think we're all carrying around tracking devices with us willingly. I mean, I know I am. I know everybody in my family is. I mean, not because we're trying to track each other, but just because my daughter's got her cell phone, and I mean, and all that has changed. And I do know that my daughter doesn't care about that very much, because she doesn't mind. I would have been outraged if I had thought that my parents were trying to monitor where I was. Like, why was your car sitting over at the lake for 3 hours last night? I mean, I would not. Is that
the slow numbing, Doug? Is that the generational slow numbing of this?
It is. And my daughter would not even bat her eyes at the fact that she knows, and I don't snoop on her or whatever. I mean, she's an adult, so. But I mean, I can pull that up right now and see where she is.
I think the generation is becoming very passive. I think out of convenience, they're just becoming very passive and accepting whatever they think sounds good.
But if we just push the authoritarianism off, I know that's not a good idea, but just for a second, we just push the dystopian authoritarianism off the page. Is that really a bad thing? I mean, I've said this on the show so many times about this book called The Light of Other Days that Arthur C. Clarke wrote about that no privacy exists anymore. This guy invents this mechanism where you can see anything, anytime in history. You can see anybody, anytime, anywhere. And the whole point of the book is about what happens when there is literally no privacy. I mean, anybody and it's about how people evolve and become, they don't care anymore. They're just like, I don't care. You don't watch me. It's boring. But I mean, do you think it's really a bad thing? I mean,
it's neither good nor bad, right? Like, this is the discussion of a tool. This is the discussion of, like a gun, or like some people don't like guns, so we'll try not to use that analogy. But like, as a tool, how it is used and what ends up happening to it later on is the outcome. That is the scenario. It is not good or bad. I think there are good use cases for this, and there's a lot of good things that come out of this. On that same token, you have a lot of authoritarian and monetary things that could come out of this later. So how it is used plays into this long term, and I think that is yet to be decided.
You're right. And I think ultimately society is going to decide when they want to push back. At what point do they want to push back when it affects them? I mean,
maybe too late by then.
I think maybe too late. Yeah, I think we're beyond that at this point.
It may be too late already. Yeah,
I think so.
But I will say, I mean, at the same time, I think on an individual level, if you ask somebody about their privacy, they say, "Oh, hell yeah, I want all my privacy." But the minute something happens where privacy was not a very useful thing, like I want to log into Facebook and tell you where I'm going to dinner, or I got robbed and I really want to call the state police and have them go arrest the person who robbed me, then privacy's out the window right then.
I want to use Alexa. I don't care. I want to use whatever.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like the features of my car, and I like the fact that if I park it somewhere, I can just go on my phone and find out where my car is if I happen to forget. And it's handy to see where my daughter is if I'm looking for her, because I'm like, is she coming home? Where is she? And I mean, and she doesn't mind. So it's really, in some ways, I think it's probably already too late.
And can I just say that law enforcement agrees? We've solved so many crimes through technology. It's just,
I see it all the time. I mean, like I said, you see it on Facebook and all these other social media outlets every single day. I see something posted, whether it's, does anybody know this car? Here's a hit and run. I saw one yesterday, the hit and run. They were like, has anybody seen this car? They had partial license plate. And, people were posting. I think that's, within minutes, somebody's got, the person has been apprehended, and that, so there's definitely pluses to it. What?
Remember the Olympic bombing? And it was what was that guy's name that got
Richard
Reddit? detectives went crazy and
he wasn't
they found
the guy.
wrong guy.
Yeah.
Well, there's that too. I mean, there's definitely twisty things that we'll have to learn how to deal with all this. Anyway, coming up next, the security news for this week. I hope you'll stick around, and we will see you there.